Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show People of Distinction. The talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. And people, if you want to be a part of it, head on over to peopleofdistinction.org for more info. Or of course, you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And we are very excited to showcase this next guest on our network. So sit back, strap in, and get ready for a wonderful ride. And on the line with us today, we have Father Eduardo A. Samaniego. And we're going to be discussing his amazing book, If You Preach It, They Will Come, Preaching the Word for Year A, B, and C as listeners like it. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And I do want to take this opportunity and point out that Father Eddie was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best publishers in the business, Diamond Media Press. So if you or anyone you know have a book that they'd like moved, people, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give. Contact Diamond Media and have their wonderful team move it for you. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and they specialize in taking your literary creation to the next level. So head on over to diamondmediapressco.com and figure out what they can do for you. Now, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Father Eddie here on the line. Now, the moment you head on over to his Amazon, his Barnes & Noble pages, you start to do any research on his book, If You Preach It, They Will Come, you understand what we're going to be discussing today. Now, the book has many parts, right? And it's much bigger than the words that are on the page. And at the end of the day, Father Eddie is the expert, okay? It's his book. He's written it. He's done the research, and it's his life. He's pulling a lot of this from, and he's going to be able to articulate it much better than anybody else ever could. So let's bring him here with us, okay? Father Eddie, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Nice to be here. Doing very well. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Father Eddie, it's an absolute pleasure, okay? I know you said it's nice to be here. Well, the honor is ours. We really do mean that. And I know we have a lot of information to cover pertaining to the book, and we're really looking forward to jumping into it. But before we go into the words that are on the page, I do feel that it's important to learn a little bit more about yourself and your background. So let's start there. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm the oldest of 9 children from 2 parents that came from Mexico, and I can tell you that the English that you're hearing now is a work in progress. My first language was Spanish, and I learned English starting in kindergarten. Mm-hmm. That was a pretty tough time during those years. Yeah. You know how kids can be. And so I made a decision at first grade that I'm going to speak English better than everybody in the classroom. And so I was able to apply my drive to do that, and I did get straight A's in English after that. But anyway, I grew up in Los Angeles. My parents, my dad was the oldest of 13. He emigrated to the United States in 1917 during the Revolution in Mexico. And he met my mother in 1948, and they got married in 49, and then I was born in 1950. And so I have 4 brothers, 4 sisters. We all grew up going to Catholic grammar schools and high schools, and all of us have graduated from college. My father highlighted education, and he also highlighted having some kind of a trade. My trade turned out to be as a draftsman. He was an architect. And so I worked in his office as a teenager, and then later on, when I got my degree in engineering from USC. I went to Loyola High School in Los Angeles, which is a Jesuit high school. Yeah. And I am now a Jesuit myself. I've been a Jesuit now for 42 years, and ordained a priest for 32 years. I did a lot of my studies in Spain. I did my philosophy there. I did my final stage of my Jesuit training in Salamanca. I did my philosophy in Madrid. And so I was able to definitely use my Spanish. But in my books, I have the English version, which is the one you're highlighting today, but I also have it in Spanish, and exactly the same title and the same chapters and everything that are in it.
Fantastic.
I've worked most of my years in parishes, so I know very well how to pastor a parish. I've also worked in parishes that are multilingual and multicultural. My first parish, which was here in San Diego, Christ the King, we had African American, we had Latinos, mostly from Mexico, and we had obviously the white culture as well. And so we had three different cultures, 2 languages there. When I went, and I was there 12 years, and then 10 years I was in San Jose, in the largest parish in San Jose, and we had 10 masses in 4 languages, Vietnamese, Tagalog, English, and Spanish. And so I was able to pastor the parish, and I had quite a bit of experience of how to work with the different cultures, how to respect and love the different cultures, but also know when to challenge them and help them grow, even though I'm not necessarily from their culture, like the Vietnamese or the Filipino. But I've been able to preach in English and Spanish in Spain and the United States and in Mexico. And my homilies reach the heart of everyone.
You know, Father Eddie, thank you very much for all of that fantastic information. And listen, without further ado, because as I mentioned, we have a lot of information to cover with the book, and I have so many reflections that I already want to make. And I have to remember, like, Benji, this is not about you, okay? So your book, the anchor for today's interview, is If You Preach It, They Will Come. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I got the title from Field of Dreams. I just took it. If you build it, they will come. And
Absolutely.
Scenes there, and I liked it, and so I said, preaching the Word of God is really what us priests, it's the most important thing to do every week. Mm-hmm. And so we have basically 10 minutes to somehow challenge the listener to see how the scriptures connect with their lives, and also give them enough homework to do between this Sunday and the next Sunday, so that they can feel one with the Lord. And so that's what the goal of the book is. I do have in the book, the first part of it is a manual on how to preach, and for those who have experience, how to preach better. Because I have information in there that no other homiletics professors have. I also use a book. 60 years ago, my dad gave me a book called Public Speaking as Listeners Like It. It's Toastmasters, it used to be like Toastmasters Bible. And I applied the 4 rules from that book in every one of my homilies on how to get people's interest, answer the question, why did you bring this up? Concrete examples that are easy to understand by everyone, all ages and all backgrounds. And then I answer the question, which a lot of preachers don't. So what? What does this have to do with my life? And so I always answer them at the end of the homily to give them homework, and I apply them in the rest of the book, which is a collection of 62 homilies per year, the year A, B, and C, the 3-year Catholic cycle. It's not just Catholic, because the Anglicans, the Methodists, the Lutherans all use the same 3-year cycle. Mm-hmm. They might differ on certain feasts that are celebrated or not celebrated in the denominations that I just mentioned. But it does help any priest, deacon, or catechist learn how to use the Word of God and how to be able to teach it and preach it.
There you have it. Father Eddie, next question that I want to go into. I love your book cover. So you talked about the title. But there's something about the book cover that once you see it is just so peaceful. It's so serene. It's so unifying. in a way, given the people that we see on the front cover. Now, I'm not going to assume the representation of it or the connection that it has, because you know what happens when you assume. So I'm not going to do that to you, Father Eddie. I have you here on the line. Let's go directly to the source. Talk to our listening audience about that book cover and why you chose it to be a representation for your book.
Well, I worked with Diamond Press, and they made some suggestions, and I made suggestions, and I said, I'd love to see an acacia tree in the foreground, and I'd like to have people of different ages and different races walking towards it. The acacia tree represents like the tree of life in the Jewish tradition, in the desert. And so this is, and you see the people are moving towards it. So I wanted the acacia tree represents the Word of God, to which we all are tied. And we have presently we have Pope Francis, who is a Jesuit like I am, and the Word of God is in every one of his writings, in every one of his prayer periods, in every one of his homilies, in every one of his presentations. And so it is all about making sure that the Word of God is explained in a way that every age, every gender, every denomination can understand and draw from.
You know, Father Eddie, I want to go into inspiration for a second. Now, I know your background, and I can see how this is clearly something that interests you, right? A collection of these homilies, as you've mentioned, and really utilizing the education portion. As you said, the first part of it is the educational for preachers, right? Or people that want to embark upon that path. I want to know about inspiration, though, because this very easily could have been something that you verbally told those around you, or something that you wrote that stayed on your personal shelf, but you didn't end there. You published the book and put it out for the masses as well. What were you seeing that made you feel compelled to put this work of art together?
Well, my father, who's my personal hero, every time he heard me preach or he came and saw me preach in the parishes, he really said, you ought to put this in a book, in a binder or whatever. So I took his suggestion. But every one of my homilies, I have it since 1989 when I was ordained a deacon. Every one of my homilies I carry on a thumb drive. And the book itself are 186 of my best homilies. The homilies in which people were touched, people were moved, and I practice what I preach, and exactly what Pope Francis asked for. Most of those homilies are 9.5 minutes long, and so I practice that. You have to learn how to edit. That's the hardest thing to do once you write out the entire homily. Is ask God in prayer, what do you want me to say? What do you want me not to say? And so you eliminate that. In the finished product, all of 186 of those homilies all touched home, all touched on the heart, and I wouldn't have included them if he didn't.
There you have it. People,
I have many more than that, of course. Because I send out the recent every week. I send out in English and in Spanish to well over 1,500 people that I have on my own email list.
Wow.
Have asked me to send them homilies, and they go, and then some of them send it out to others. Every once in a while, I get a letter from somebody in England or Australia or New Zealand or Spain. And then they all make comments, so I know it's getting out there. And as my first preaching professor once said, the best homily is the one that never stumps.
There you have it. Listen, people, can we have selected a more perfect embodiment of a person of distinction? I think not. You can clearly see the value in what he's saying and how this is all tried and true. As he said, this... It's a lot more than 180, or I think 186 specifically is what he said. There's a lot more than that. right? But those are some of the best ones that have made it onto the pages. And you know that these words are coming from a very knowledgeable place. It's coming from an experienced place, and it has truly moved mountains for other people. Just imagine what it can do for you. Once again, we're here on the line with Edward A. Samaniego. We're discussing his book, If You Preach It, They Will Come, Preaching the Word for Year A, B, and C, as listeners like it. Father Eddie is someone that is really a remarkable person. You have to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble to pick up your copies, but do yourself a favor and head on over there, okay? Father Eddie, next question that I'd love to get into, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began on this journey?
Well, one of the things I learned, and I learned it before I started preaching, I was in my theology classes, and we were practicing some homilies. One of the things I learned is that not only do I have to know the audience I'm speaking to, but I also have to know myself in relation to them. So like in the manual part of the book, I have, and I haven't seen it in any other books, is the distinction of using the Myers-Briggs personality testing in order to help the preacher understand what percentage of the people process and think like you do. My four personality traits, which is extroverted, intuitive, feeler, I'll think of it real quick. But I wanted to show my letters are only 12% of the population. So how am I going to reach the 88%?
Right.
And in that class, I learned that what I do, I have to take stories and bridge them, because the sensates, I'm only 12% as a feeler, as an intuitive, I mean. And the sensates, they need step-by-step processes, and they need to be able to go from point A to point B. And if you don't do that, you lose it. So I learned in one of my first homilies I ever gave, I told 3 stories, and I thought everybody could see the connection. And as it turned out, they didn't. There were those that were sensates. They all said, "You told great stories, but what's the point?" And those that were feelers were passing around the Kleenex because it hit them right in the heart. And so I realized then that what I had to do was use bridge sentences between ideas, and I have to be able to make it easy for a sensate to be able to follow how I get from this point to that point. Intuitives don't need that. They get it on their own. Right. It's like people who can do math in their heads, and then they can know the answer, whereas others have to write every step down, and then get the same answer. It takes longer.
Yeah. You know, Father Eddie, what a great segue that you've established here. I want to go into next, and I think we've already started to cover some of this, but if we have, totally fine, because it's so important. I think it's worth doubling down on and repeating. Who would you say is your intended audience with this book, and what is the main message that you hope that they receive from it?
Well, the main message I hope is that my faith and how I live it permeates every one of the words that are in that book, and that if I can help you grow in your own personal faith with the Lord, and if I'm able to break through things that are obstacles, I have had a lot of experience working with, like I said, different cultures. I heard you mention at the beginning, about the higher power, which most people don't realize that it was a Jesuit alcoholic who helped Mr. Wilson write the big book for the 12 steps for the Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's used by all of the serenity prayer that comes from the 12-step program is very Ignatian. St. Ignatius Loyola wrote a way to be able to how to make good decisions and discern. Well, the priest that helped Bill Wilson write it all up and made the Serenity Prayer main prayer that's used for the higher power of all of the people that are there. Grant me the serenity or peace to accept what I cannot change. Give me the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's where I really focus. All my homilies really are trying to lead people to the wisdom to know the difference between God's voice, God's will, and the voice and the will of the evil one, and the voice and the will of the world, which is not necessarily in tune with the Lord.
Absolutely. There's so much wisdom. People, we've barely scratched the surface. That's what we've covered in the past 20 minutes during this interview. Imagine what you're going to discover when you head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you purchase your copies. I'm telling you, this is a wonderful, wonderful resource to add to your shelf. It's an even better gift to add to someone else's. So I'm going to say it for you once more. I know I don't have to, but let's just re-impress it one last time. We're here on the line with Eduardo A. Samaniego, SJ. We finished discussing his amazing book, If You Preach It, They Will Come. Again, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. Head on over there today, purchase your copies, get a copy for someone else, and just spread the love. I truly mean, this book is much bigger than the words that are on the page. I mean, this is a movement, people. This is a lifestyle change. Just get lost in the journey that he has created for you, and you can thank me later. Father Eddie, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you so much. God bless you all.